Welcome to the June meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee. It's my pleasure now to ask Councillor Philo if she will lead us in the karakia, which is both in our papers and also on the screen. Thank you, Councillor.
Me ino I tātou, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Philo. First item on our agenda is apologies, and we have an apology today from Councillor Turan, and also note a leave of absence for Councillor Johnson. So I'm happy to move that apology for Councillor Turan. It's been seconded by Councillor Duncan. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Agenda item 3, we have a public participation session on our agenda today, and it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Brian Warburton, if you'd like to sort of come forward to the seat here, Mr. Warburton. Just to remind you, under the standing orders, the standing orders say that there are 5 minutes for presentation and questions. And is formalised by a bell ringing at 4 minutes and then again at 5 minutes. If I can just remind members of the Audit and Risk Committee that we cannot enter into debate as part of the public participation, but we can ask questions of clarification. So thank you. Welcome again, Mr. Warburton, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity. I've got some copies of my presentation. I'd like to table those for distribution.
Certainly, very, very happy for that to happen. Just be aware that they were distributed to members of the committee. I think you sent them into the office, so they have been distributed, but members may not have a hard copy of them, so we will hand them out, and members of the EALT have them as well.
Thank you. I'm here to speak to the committee about an aspect of the Council's operations that is far removed from best practice. Thank you for that opportunity. I've described the matter I'm speaking to as being Council's practice for the collection and reporting of environmental data is defective. Overflow events at Rukatani Point Pump Station PS35 result in discharges of untreated wastewater to the coastal environment at Titahi Bay. These overflow events occur when the pump's capacity is exceeded, which is currently notionally 140 litres per second. Please note that this pump capacity has only recently been achieved due to strong advocacy from members of the community that resulted in recent overdue renewal of pump infrastructure. I've attached data about overflow events during the October 24 to March 25 period. These overflow events are within the reporting period of this committee. As the committee will note, the compliance report doesn't refer to non-compliances due to these overflow events. All the discharges from Pump Station 35 are unlawful for one simple fact. Porirua City Council doesn't have a consent, and therefore those discharges breach RMA Section 15 obligations. I've presented a data summary showing the compliance surveys and reports have consistently failed to report the RMA breaches associated with Pump Station 35 overflows. Pump Station 35 is not the only wastewater pump station in Porirua that operates unlawfully. I've attached a list of all the other pump stations. RMA breaches and inadequate and inaccurate compliance surveys and reporting by staff are serious matters. Staff has failed in its duty to apply good practice, and staff has presented information that misrepresents Council's RMA compliance or lack thereof. This matter reflects badly on the Council's ability to meet its obligations as a public entity. In fact, it leaves the Council exposed to potential compliance and enforcement procedures, which can include substantial fines. This is not good governance. There are negative consequences for the health and safety of persons using the receiving environment for recreation, and also for the natural environment that relies on proper management of contaminants. PCC needs to adopt a revised, rigid and disciplined approach to its management of regulatory compliance issues. All councillors should be aware of the failure of internal mechanisms and processes relating to regulatory compliance I have mentioned. To ensure transparency and accountability, the Council should issue appropriate and strict instructions to its senior staff. To this end, I have presented 2 resolutions to this committee that it would be entitled to make in the circumstances. In summary, Resolution 1, the committee resolves to recommend to Council that it directs Council staff to prepare changes to the scope and process of the 6 monthly surveys so all overflows are appropriately monitored and recorded. Resolution 2, that the committee resolves to recommend to Council that it directs staff to collect the compliance data that it should have been collecting since the 1st of October, or preferably longer. I ask that this presentation, along with the cited attachments and recommendations, be accepted into the official record of this meeting and recorded as such in the minutes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr Warburton, and I can confirm that the distributed report will be tabled at this meeting. Are there any questions of clarification on Mr Warburton's presentation? There appears to be none, so thank you very much, Mr Warburton, for being with us here today. Wish you well for the balance of the day. Agenda item 4, conflicts of interest. Agenda item 4, conflicts of interest. Again, it's important to remind that have I missed something? Or no, okay. There's a bit going on around here. I thought I must have overlooked something. Conflicts of interest, that's to say, important that our interest registers are maintained and up to date, and there's a declaration of any conflicts of interest for any of our specific agenda items today. So can I ask, has anybody got any conflicts of interest or changes to their register that they wish to deal with here at the meeting? All right, there being none, thank you for that. Notification of any extraordinary business. We have not been made aware that there's any extraordinary business to be considered at this meeting. Again, silence is assent. I assume there is none. Right, confirmation of minutes. Our last meeting on the 3rd of April. The minutes are in your paper. Is there any alterations, deletions, amendments to those minutes? All right, I'm happy to move then that we confirm the minutes from the meeting held on the 3rd of April 2025 as an accurate record. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Waddle. Moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary carried. Right, agenda item 7.1, always an important agenda item on our regular meetings. Health and Safety Quarterly Report. Sam, are you going to speak to this? Come to the table. So to get the report on the table, I'll move that the Audit and Risk Committee receive this report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Leggett. Moved and seconded, so we will open it for discussion. Sam, thank you for your report. Perhaps highlight, just draw attention to those matters you feel that we need our attention drawn to in your quarterly report.
Morena koutou, through you, Chair. A couple of things I'd like to highlight in this particular report. One, there probably isn't too much difference in the previous reporting period. It is eerily similar, not so much in a good way. Obviously, threatening behaviour remains at a constant. Again, we don't like seeing those figures that high. Unfortunately, in that space as well, we're starting to see a gradual transition away from verbal abuse to a bit more physical in their nature, which one of our team experienced that during this particular reporting period. So we are starting to see those an evolving environment when it comes to our staff and engaging with some members of public and other in high intensity situations. The other point to note is we've had a few more vehicle related incidents reported in this particular period as well, and as a consequence of that, over the last 6 months we've been bringing in a few more driving related trainings and assessments about do our staff have the right trainings to operate in wet environments, four-wheel driving, etc. So there's been a bit of a focus both continuing in threatening behaviour space but also in the driver-related space. Training remains to be quite good across the board and good participation as well as attendance by groups, and that's another area that we'll be looking at is the potential changes that are on the horizon, especially being driven by the central government space and what that means for us and what do we need to think about with these potential changes that are coming through. One particular example is the new guidance on psychosocial risks, where WorkSafe have updated their expectations, where they're asking PCBUs to consider psychosocial risks just as equally as physical risks. And so again, it's what does that mean for us? How can we put things in place to meet, again, WorkSafe expectations? It's no longer guidance, it's becoming more of an enforcement undertaking. So how do we adhere to those new expectations that will be coming our way eventually? But I think that's pretty much it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sam. Open for questions. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sam. Look, on page 13, the blocked fire exit at Patika, that was a worry. And I wonder, and I see we spoke to the team about being careful with that. Do we do that in a wider sense for all of the buildings that we have across council?
Yes, there has been a reminder to teams about how we can do that in an appropriate manner. We can block exits on a temporary basis. This was to help establish a particular event, but there are mechanisms through our property team to facilitate that, to make sure we adhere to the fire compliance regulations. So it's just to make our staff aware, okay, if you're going to do that, we need to be aware of the implications and think about evacuation routes and those sorts of things.
Great. One
Certainly, Councillor.
on page 20, the near miss, the generator battery exploded. That's a worry. What sort of battery was that was involved? And was nobody was actually hurt in the incident?
Through the Chair, no body was hurt in that particular incident. I don't know the details, the types of battery, but we have started seeing a number of incidents of late with battery-related explosions incidents. So I'll take notice of that, and I'll inquire with Wellington Water on that particular one.
The page 21 on 11.3, civics come up with no further details provided on their explanation for the problems they had. Is that okay to just not provide any information, is it?
Sorry. I'll follow up on that one as well. I think I've reported in the past this is a bit of an ongoing type of conversation with our contractors on the type of data that we'd like to see from them. We are starting to see improved data from the likes of Down and other bigger contractors, so it'll be a similar conversation with some of these other ones, as we don't just want injury-related data. There's other mechanisms that describe how well your health and safety system is beyond injuries or not.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Leggett.
Thanks for the report, Sam. Can you just explain a little bit more about what are psychosocial risks?
These are probably things that reside in the mental health type of space. It's the consequences of bullying, the consequences of work-related stress, fatigue, those compounding effects on your mental state, and the acknowledgement that if you're not in a good mental state, then that has unintended consequences on your productivity in the workplace, which then takes it home back to home, which has consequences there, and then it just becomes a compounding effect. It is quite a holistic, nuanced space that are very complicated and complex, as the human brains are, but it's something that WorkSafe are providing a bit more expectation on us to consider, especially in this day and age.
Thanks. One more. Sorry, and given certainly in the last 2 quarters, that increased incidence of threatening behaviour, actual physical contact, do you have any plans to address that in any way, shape or form?
One of the requests that we've had from our people managers is more bespoke de-escalation training. We provide a suite of de-escalation training already, going from short, concise 1 hour awareness sessions to much more intense whole day sessions. And now our teams are asking, what is is there a next level, an advanced type of approach towards this? There are other mechanisms to explore as well. CCTV coverage, again, what are those mitigating controls we can put in place, which there are conversations across council in those sorts of areas. But the biggest area that we can control a bit more is in our people. So that will be our primary focus, de-escalation, but also what house do we need to provide to enable our staff to be able to deal with those sorts of situations.
Sorry, Felicity?
Thanks. Just picking up again on the threatening behaviour and the increase in the last 2 quarters. What's this last 3 months looked like? Is it still at this sort of level?
Through the chair, unfortunately, yes, similar levels. And then, of course, this particular period, we've seen a physical nature of some of them.
So when you talk about the breakdown, you've got staff and contractors and then between customers and members of public. Last meeting we talked about the increase of social media attack against politicians as well, councillors. And I guess reading this, it's quite concerning with the lead into the election. Are you seeing an increase in that, or is there any abatement, or what are you doing to support councillors as well as staff?
Through the chair, I can't quite answer whether we're seeing more or less of that towards our councillors.
Doesn't seem to be captured in the...
No.
No, okay. So it's probably more than what we're seeing in the numbers. Yeah. So I guess just it's getting worse. And not really a question, but a comment that hopefully you're doing all you can.
Thanks, Felicity. I think the Chief Executive would like to add a comment on that.
Well, just an observation really that councillors aren't part of our notification system. I do get our comms team to monitor how that social media is behaving. We have observed, we have got an increase in complaints. We do get, it is nastier online. Interestingly, we've gone back and looked in other election years. It's those things coincide with election years. It apparently, there's certainly that connection. So, but it is worthwhile thinking about what we do in terms of elected members' health and safety. So we will turn our minds to that. And the only other addition I would make is that we are looking at some technology options, it's early stages for some of our enforcement activities. For example, there is some technology available, and of course our parking wardens are one of the places that get the worst abuse because they're ticketing people when they don't like it. So we are looking at some technology options there.
Thank you, Wendy. Councillor Philo, and then the Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty concerning about the escalation with the actual physical abuse. Just talking to that data on page 14, it's just a quick question. The threatening behaviour numbers, can you please remind me when we started including customers in those figures?
Through the chair, probably only a couple of years ago we started including customers. Prior to that, it was mostly staff focused. But as a reminder from WorkSafe, it's not just staff that we have to be concerned about under the new Health and Safety at Work Act. They refer to workers and others refer to visitors, customers, anyone that utilises our facilities who may come into get exposed to risks that we either create or control. And so reporting on customer health and safety in our facilities is part of, I guess, that high level expectation to understand whether we're managing the risks not just to staff but also anyone that comes into our space.
Sorry, I think I might have got this wrong. I felt like it was a recent thing, but was that more for the arena that we were capturing numbers on customers separately? I felt like that was a recent conversation in audit and risk.
Through the chair, I don't quite recall. We have been reporting across the board on customers. It's just by chance that the arena are very exceptional at providing incident reports from customers compared to other business units. So that's possibly why you might see more from the arena.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I understand we don't do anything for councillor, or we don't do anything online for any form of councillor apart from watching. What about in the safety of our chambers? We have one little camera and nothing else, which doesn't get the whole side of the room, and that doesn't often record for the whole session. And we have our people who come in to speak who go in and out and up and down our floors. They could go up instead of going down because there's no one taking them anywhere. So when we have large groups, it's easy for someone to peel off or go into offices. I don't lock my office. Are we going to do anything about that sort of behaviour? Because that's increasing too.
You will recall that the council did consider moving the council chamber to the ground floor for exactly those reasons, but decided not to. I couldn't resist saying that, sorry, but...
It was purely the cost, remember?
It was cost. And we weren't actually experiencing some of the things that we do now. So we have considered bringing security guards in here. It's not something I personally favour. I think that is a retrograde step and gives the wrong impression about the chamber. We could upgrade the cameras. These are exceptional circumstances. They don't happen very often. So it's a bit of a judgment call at the moment about that, but we'll keep it under advisement really and consider. I'm actually hoping post-election that things get smoother, but we'll, who knows? But it is, you're right. We do have public coming all through our building. We have taken the move in the past to block off access at other times, and certainly people can't get into other floors on the building, but they do have free rein on this floor. And certainly the staff, my staff at the front of the floor have raised it as a concern. So we're aware of the issue, but I think it's probably for the moment okay.
Felicity.
I'd just like to comment on the exceptional circumstances and for the moment okay. I would challenge that. I think there's an escalation and a pattern that happens every 3 years. And as Sam pointed out, the responsibilities under the Act go to all the people working there, whether they're staff or not. So I'd just like to put a plug in for prioritising increased measures to support the safety and well-being of councillors. I understand that it's exceptional because it's the election, but it's a regular event and it's a long period of time, and that heightens the risk. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Felicity. Any further discussion? Thank you, Sam. As always, really good report. Always stimulates some very valuable discussion. So I thank you for that. We've moved and seconded that the Audit and Risk Committee receive this report. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Agenda item 7.2, the internal audit report on sensitive expenditure. I understand that we're going to be joined online by two Deloitte people who undertook this work. Amelia's here, so no, there's an update on that. So Amelia from Deloitte is here in person, and it's lovely to welcome her to the Audit and Risk Committee. Her colleague David, who was going to be online, I've just been informed is now not. So we have Amelia. So thank you, Phyllis and Amelia, for coming to the table. To get the report on the table for discussion, I will move that the Audit and Risk Committee receive the report on sensitive expenditure. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duncan. So over to you, Phyllis. Take the report as read, highlight any areas where you feel that we need attention drawn to. Thanks.
Morena koutou, thank you. With leave from the chair, I would also introduce Amelia from Deloitte, as mentioned, and she would provide a bit more detail about the report. But just to start off with, we are really pleased with the work that Deloitte has done, and that management accepts the finding raised in the Deloitte report on sensitive expenditure. Just to highlight, since the report has been issued to us, to management, we have completed some of the actions and recommendations in the report. This include updating the elected member expense claim form to have 2 signatories, so that it's a bit more obvious that dual signatories are required. Any overpayment of allowances to staff that has been clawed back as well, that's been repaid back. We've also recently updated our travel policy and just tightening that up a little bit, including how we spend our allowances. We are also reviewing through finance the narrations that we have within the invoices, and a lot of it is where we don't put enough information for a third party to understand what that expense is about. A lot of it is about putting the number of people and the specific event within that within the information. And we've also did some training around GST for the finance staff. We had a number of new staff within the team. So we have other actions ongoing as well. And through you, Chair, if we could let Amelia speak to people.
Cool. Thank you for your time this morning. So I'm Amelia Heyman, and I'm a manager at Deloitte, and so I led and delivered this review. David is overseas, so he's an apology. In terms of this review, the internal control assessments rating was effective. So in summary, the sensitive expenditure policies and associated processes generally aligned with AOG guidance. However, we identified some opportunities for improvement in the following areas. So specifically, elected members acquiring the necessary signatures for their expenses, as Phyllis has spoken to. In addition, implementing controls to enforce the mobile device policy. And then in addition, improving clarity in the policies, chart of accounts and expense narration. So as Phyllis has said, providing that clarity so that as an independent person, we can understand what it's about. Hello? Yeah. Much better. Great. Would anybody like me to repeat myself, or is that?
Ford and Councillor We Happy are watching online, so yeah.
Okay. Sure. I'll just go through the two key points just to make sure everyone has heard me. So the overall policies and associated processes are generally aligned to AOG good practice. Some key areas were elected members acquiring the necessary signatures for their expenses, implementing controls to enforce the mobile device policy, thirdly, improving clarity in the policies, chart of accounts and expense narrations, and then lastly, increasing the oversight of the gifts and hospitality register. Is there any questions regarding this report?
Thank you, Amelia. Open it up for questions now. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks very much for this report. I was just intrigued with the mobile roaming charge. I'd imagine when officers are using that, it's for business, it's for the company they're doing it. It just seems like an awkward imposition on them to have to gain permission before they do this. Is there any way that a blanket permission can be there for them to use it? Just to go ahead and use the thing, because I just see that as a hell of an obstacle.
Through the chair. Thanks, Councillor Duncan. That would probably would require change in our mobile usage policy for us to enable that to be compliant. I guess there's a balance there as to reasonableness of use, but normally at the moment, yeah, it's we'd expect people to get permission, and that's what's been picked up in the audit, that permission was not gained. So you can either put constraints on it or release them, but we need to do that through the mobile usage policy. So we could take that under consideration.
Thank you, Jim. Can I comment? I think this is a appropriate internal exercise. It's an area that is always subject to a lot of external scrutiny, and to have the policies and the systems looked at independently once a year or regularly is worthwhile. So I think this is a really good exercise, some good recommendations coming out of it. So shout out for those involved. Councillor Philo.
You mentioned that the travel policy had been updated. Does that mean, because there was mention in the report about the CE's lounge membership or kuru club, so has that been updated now to include that as part of the policy?
We have included a statement saying that CE's lounge membership must be approved by the mayor. So the decision would lie with the mayor.
I can respond to that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry, ever since the mayor was, the CE was employed here, which was before I was mayor, her Koru Club was included in her contract. We didn't realise it was actually not written into her contract because it was part of the policy. So that will get updated in the CE's committee, because she's always had a Koru Club membership from the date she arrived here back in, was it Mayor Leggett's days? Or Mayor, yes. Anyway, it's been there the whole time. So, yeah, obviously that's just, as you said, not picking up on the paperwork. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Mayor. Councillor Waddle.
Yeah, just quickly on that subject of lounge membership, is from Amelia, from Deloitte's perspective, is a lounge membership a standard practice across public sector CEOs?
The lounge access is rather dependent on how frequently individuals travel. So it tends to be proportional to what their role is and what their needs are as, executive leadership. So, it depends on what the organisation is, but it would be aligned with policy. I think that was kind of the key call out here was in isolation. Cool. It's got an approval from the expected individuals, but in terms of aligning the paperwork and having that policy alignment, that was the key point there.
Perfect, thank you. And just a second question, around all these policies that apply to staff and ELT and councillors, do we capture training on these policies before they have use on this, or is this a blanket? You're expected to read this policy, you're expected to abide by it, or are we getting, bona fide signatures to say they understand what's in these policies?
At induction, people are given access to all these policies. It's probably overstating it to say training. And we do have a lot of policies, not exactly training, but they're certainly at induction. They are, there's a code of conduct which is requires them to read that and acknowledge receipt, and the policies are all highlighted. So depends how diligent people are at induction a little bit, but certainly they should be aware of things like that. Travel isn't super common except in this organisation, except for myself and the Mayor do a bit, and the pātaka does a bit because of their connections, usually generally funded externally. So that's the kind of level. Pretty well everything else is quite exceptional. So on this one, probably not so much. There's even not very much travel around the country, not so much training.
Just through the chair, just to add to that, so one of the recommendations, or one of the management responses in the report, talks about P-card transactions and the annotation of those. And of course, what's been found in the audit is that we're not always picking up on the GST. We're not always picking up necessarily the number of people that are having dinner, which is a requirement. So what we've intended here is that there would be some training, refresher training. And I think that sort of goes alongside a lot of the other policies that we have, where we think we need to emphasise them, that training will continue. We're doing it currently, for example, in the security area, where there's actually an online training module, and then there's ongoing. It's a lot of fun, right? And then there'll be ongoing, shall we call, phishing attacks, which you'll be tested, and you'll get your feedback. And that is actually very useful, not just for business, but also for your personal awareness. So yeah, we are appropriate. We're trying to target the training, working in conjunction with Jerry's team.
All right, thank you. Again, excellent discussion. Thank you very much, Phyllis, and Amelia. Pass our thanks to David as well for this piece of work. So it's been moved and seconded that the Audit and Risk Committee receive the report on sensitive expenditure. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Agenda item 7.3, the Three Waters valuation. As we're just introducing this, I ask Ian and Peter to come to the table. I will move that we receive this report and we note the results of the draft revaluation and the financial implications the revaluation will have in the 24-25 financial year and also the 25-26 annual plan. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Leggett. Ian and Peter, excellent report. A really significant work stream, if you like, recently. Can I congratulate you on bringing that forward so that we're not dealing with these issues, right at the sort of end of the financial close and audit process. So thank you for the report. Take it as read, highlight anything in there that you feel that we need to be fully aware of.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. Revaluations are not normally something that generates a lot of interest, but I think what we've seen, historically valuations just kind of creep up with around about inflation and so on. But what we've seen in the last couple of years in basically a lot of other local government territorial authorities through New Zealand is a really substantial jump, particularly in Three Waters. And that has ramifications in depreciation. Obviously, if the value of your assets is increasing, then your depreciation charges in the following year will also significantly jump. And that's where it intersects with rates issues and are you rate funding depreciation? Now, we've already had those conversations as part of the annual plan process. But I really just felt that it was necessary to bring this paper to Audit and Risk because it's such a significant jump, and I didn't want to keep it to myself. Full transparency, and share, some of the burden, some of the love. So look, we had the benefit, I guess, of tracking behind our fellow Wellington councils. They did their 3 water revaluation last year, and we watched the turmoil, is that the right word, or the pain that they went through last year. So we were able to be a little bit more proactive. We pulled forward the effective date of revaluation from 30th of June to 31st of December, thinking that those 6 months would give us the time to review, challenge, audit, the results in time for 30th of June and have the revaluation bedded in effectively. What's happened is that you'll note that this paper's been prepared on the basis that we're still in a draft state. We have reviewed it, we have prodded and kicked and challenged, and we've been through that exercise with our valuers. We're reasonably comfortable, but then it goes to the next level, which is our auditors, and they're doing the same, and justifiably so. So it's still a draft, I'm well conscious that 30th of June is not too far around the corner. But the results of the draft are really showing that the 3 waters has jumped up by $250 million. Which is a staggering number. Sorry, I say $250 million based on the previous revaluation. So there have been some capitalisations, obviously, in the last 18 months. But generally, the most of that movement is through the revaluation. And that's quite staggering. It's unprecedented. So it's significant. As I mentioned earlier, it does therefore flow into depreciation charges. Because we've dated it 31st of December, there'll be 6 months of depreciation at this increased rate that will hit in the current year. And then, the full value of that depreciation will hit in next year as well. Now, the council made a decision as part of the annual plan process that we wouldn't allow for a rates increase to take into account this increase in revaluation. But if we had, it would be a significant hit, which would have us running in horror. No other way of putting it. But we've made that decision. But what it does do is it has a bigger impact on the balanced budget than what we had talked about or socialised as part of the annual plan workshops and processes that we went through. So as part of the annual plan, I think we said that the balanced budget deficit would be 7.8 million. Well, because of this jump in depreciation, it's now going to be more like 14 million. So that just gives you a sense of the significance of this issue, and hence the need to share this, because it's such a big thing. I know revaluations aren't very exciting, but this one is. So look, paper's read. I understand. I hope it's being useful to you, and we're of course open to questions to clarify any points.
Thank you very much, Ian. Very clear paper. Always difficult in a paper to sort of transmit or socialise challenging information, but you've done that well. I know it's not very helpful, but the entire sector is going through this challenge as part of the water reform. The revaluation of water infrastructure has been a challenge across the country. So with that background, let's open it up for questions. Councillor Leggett.
Yes, very, very clear report. The general comment I have is, ouch. and I probably could emphasise that more. But the question I have, the auditor review, where is that at? And I'm assuming that'll have no material effect on what you've been reporting now anyway.
Sam, are you comfortable to respond to that?
Sure. So we've kicked off with the draft, but we're still sort of gathering the information. We've identified the key areas that drive the most material elements of the cost increase, but there's plenty of work ahead of us. And in terms of the outcome, we're not in a position to say yet, but one comment I will add is, as Ian notes in his paper, Hutt City had an emphasis of matter in their audit report, really just highlighting that there's inherent uncertainty as to the cost of replacing these assets in the future, which is the estimate, the primary estimate in these valuations, and we may well end up in a similar place, but that work's ahead of us, and it's a process that we interface with the Office of the Auditor General on as well.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor Filo?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I've got a few questions for this. Thank you, Ian, for this report. It was, I think it's good to just get that transparency out. In terms of what I'm trying to get a gauge of now is actual real life consequences. So obviously the annual plan that we're going to, that for this end of financial year, we'll have that 6 months of reevaluation effects, as in the depreciation costs will be tagged on and will unbalance that budget more than we would suspect. And then it will have the same effect for the following annual plan. I note in the report that it says that it is based on the inflated pricing because of, Wellington Water going through their procurement processes now and trying to address that. So that, as well as the fact that the depreciation is a paper cost, is a paper expense, and the water entity will be, I'm assuming, right, 1 July, we will not be paying depreciation on our assets anymore. So I'm trying to gauge what are the actual consequences here for council, because that obviously that I'm assuming will go when they transfer over. Is it that it will now be the entities will now have a larger amount of depreciation or renewals to fix, but I guess they will also then have more efficiencies in how those are then done. Point 13 talked about this having a bit of a long-term effect, and if we're going to be handing our assets back and that depreciation will not be then coming into effect, what are the actual consequences for this council of this report?
Well, sure.
I'll do my usual. I'll make a comment and then then Ian can correct me. So this is a 1-year impact because we will, all things going well on water, we will be transferring our assets at 1 July next year. Before then, we will have to do a valuation of our water assets, a common valuation across all councils. So at the moment, the other councils who are intending to join the water entity did theirs a year earlier and with a different valuer and presumably on a similar basis, but actually we do need to, at transfer, have greater comparability across our valuations. So there will be another close on our heels valuation process. The other thing is that it doesn't, it has a long-term impact potentially into the water entity, but there's quite a lot of moving parts on all of that. And the issue for us is that we will just have a greater bridge to a gap to bridge rather to when we readjust our financials post water reform. So yes, it increases the gap in the meantime, our balanced budget gap. So, but that's not enduring as long as water reform occurs. That's an issue that we will resolve at that point. So that's why we've made some choices this year. Well, you've made some choices this year about the way we have managed our annual plan, because this is a very unusual year for the council in this planning cycle. So,
Sure, Jim.
Just one point I think councillors should be aware of, and we'll talk about this through the insurance paper. Obviously, valuations have a flow-on effect to insurances, and we'll discuss that briefly, because clearly the higher the valuation, the more insurance cover that we will need. So there are some implications of understanding your risks and your risk appetite during the next period until we actually transfer assets to the new water entity. So we'll discuss that in the private part of the meeting.
Nothing to add, all correct. It's always good. If your question is towards the ratepayer, impact on the ratepayer, just to add, I think we've made the decisions now for next year, and so that won't make a difference to rates. These are kind of financial numbers that will flow through our accounting surplus, our balanced budget, and so on. But it doesn't. Just to be very clear, there is no impact on our ratepayers in the next 12 months. But what it does mean is that it makes that valuation issue on transfer to the new organisation very, very, very important. That's where the rubber will hit the road, I think. So for this year, we'll see a higher depreciation charge coming through, which will drop our accounting surplus and then worsen the balanced budget issue than this year. Next year, the same. Our accounting surplus. We've already factored it in to the annual plan based on the draft that we have at the moment, assuming that the draft doesn't move much through the finalisation process. But we've already factored in the increased depreciation charge that we expect. So a lot of this is going to be financial, not ratepayer impacting. Does that help?
Yeah, sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. I wasn't asking about the ratepayer. I get that. We didn't pass that on. It was really what it was, is saying, well, what are the consequences of this unbalanced budget of $14 million, because 1 July 2026, it seems like that's majority of it will be addressed. So for this 1 year of impact, what are the consequences of it? You mentioned insurance, but it seems like our insurance has gone down.
We will talk about that in private.
Okay, yeah. I'm just saying it doesn't seem relevant to what you were saying, that's all.
I'll explain that in private through the chair.
Okay. So that's what I'm trying to gauge, is what are the implications of that 14 million for everyday people in the city? They might hear this and be like, oh my gosh, what's going on, But to tell them in everyday terms, like, maybe you don't need to worry, because come 1 July, those depreciation costs, we won't have them anymore. A lot of our debt will be transferred. And how will our budget be then for 1 July 2026? Will it still be unbalanced? Will this mean that we won't be able to get loans? Like, I'm trying to gauge, like, what's the real consequences of this?
Through you, Chair.
I'll pop through the chair, perhaps just cut to the chase and try and answer that. At the point of transfer, we will move out of an unbalanced budget. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, but we will see a reduction in our rates. It's inevitable because of 70% of our debt is going to transfer to the new water entity, and yet it only contributes about 30% of our revenue and asset values, right? So we're going to be financially in a much stronger position. So then there's an imposition on the new water entity as to how it wants to claw back depreciation and price that. So that's a subsequent effect. But in terms of this council right now, ratepayers shouldn't be concerned at all. And in fact, the Standard & Poor's look through this because they really only look at the cash flows. Depreciation is a non-cash item. So from our rating, from the rating agencies, they ignore it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. Any further questions, discussions? Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks for this. A great report. It covers it admirably for me. One thing I looked at the end of Aon's report was a whole list of suggestions for the next valuations. What sort of impact will those suggestions have on the budget?
Through you, Chair.
Page 79 it is.
Page 79. Oh. Sorry, I've got the page.
Sorry,
different.
it's fine.
Yes, so can I, through the chair, can I answer that question?
Please, Jim.
So we, during this process, and particularly when we started talking about the implications for insurance, as I mentioned earlier, what Aon have said to us is that there is a consistent theme across all councils where it is really difficult to do valuations, and their confidence in them is moderate, to say the least. And part of that is because of the quality of the condition data. Also understanding that some assets are buried deeper and they've got in different soils, and they themselves were making attempts to actually try and identify, they have identified a process where they could work more collaboratively with the asset manager in identifying those areas which are at risk and that can be investigated. So I think going forward you'll see the valuers becoming a little bit more sophisticated in their data management, data cleansing, and working more closely with the asset owners to go, look, you need to put a bit of energy into this area. So high degree of variability. In fact, I think the paper actually says, their paper says moderate confidence in these numbers.
Yep.
And we would have to agree.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Councillor, thank you. Mayor.
It's a comment, really. Thank you for this report. It just proves the valuations are going up and down all the time, and trying to get it right for handover is really hard. The important thing for our residents is making sure we have a charter for affordable water inside the new entity. So thank you. Really well done.
Thank you, Mayor, for those comments. Again, we've been spoilt with a really good paper, prompted some really good discussion and questions. So I thank all concerned for that. So we've had moved and seconded that we received this report, and we note the results of the draft revaluation and the financial implications the revaluation will have in the 24-25 financial statements and the 25-26 annual plan. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you, team. Okay, agenda item 7.4, the interim audit status update. Is that for you to address for us, Peter? So you can stay there. So I will move that the Audit and Risk Committee receive this report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor. Moved and seconded. So thank you. Take the report as read, Peter. Just draw our attention to any issues we need to be fully aware of.
Through the chair, We had the auditors in a couple of months ago to do our interim audit. You can see from the status update that we're on track. They did identify a couple of issues in our significant financial processes. So you can see highlighted there around rates and asset management. So the issue around the rates is it's to do with comparing our rating database to the QV database. It's particularly around the number of units recorded. So we're still working through those discrepancies and making sure the two databases align. The second issue there is around asset management. So that's around the distinction between operating expenditure and capital expenditure, just making we get those transactions in the right buckets.
Thank you, Peter. Sam from EY, anything to add before we open it up for discussion?
Look, that's a really good summary and hits the two yellow points in our report. And then the previous paper on valuation is probably the big thing on our mind as we stare down 30 June next week.
Thank you, Sam. Questions, discussion on the interim audit? Councillor Leggett.
Just out of interest, how different or how significantly different are the discrepancies between the two databases in terms of number of properties?
I think the last time I checked, there was about 300 properties where we've got discrepancies. Roughly 25% are residential, the balance is rural business properties. So for the residential properties, the main issue is often in QV system, they might have a property recorded as having 2 units, whereas in our database, we have 1 unit. So it might be the property has a granny flat or something on the back that we've missed in our system. For the business, it's a little bit more of a discrepancy, I suppose. Often QV, when they record a business, they might record it as 1 unit, but according to our accounting policy, it might mean that we need to record it as 10 units, for example. So there's a lot more of a discrepancy in those. It's really an individual process. We need to check each property one by one. It's time consuming.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we receive this report. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you, team, again for that. All right, we welcome Graham to the table for the standing agenda item for the Treasury compliance report. To get that report on the table, I will move that the Audit and Risk Committee receive this report. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Waddle. Thank you, Graham. Again, it's always a bit of a challenge for us to sort of get our minds around this, but you help us out immensely with it. So again, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. We are fully compliant with the Treasury policy. I've listed on para 8 was the transactions which we've done in the last quarter or since the last report. And the thing which we're working through now, we'd had a discussion yesterday with PwC, as I've mentioned in the para 6, going through the debt projections, now using the annual plan, and we're also working through the impact of the water reform post 1 July 26 and on our debt positions and how we manage that. Other than that, I'll just take any questions.
Thank you, Graham. Always comforting to know that we're fully compliant. So, Councillor Leggett.
Just post-July next year, so does that, because our debt level is going to change significantly, are there any liabilities that we might potentially have to deal with in terms of obligations to our lenders?
Oh, no. No, but what we're working through, and part of the regional team is working through as well, is the assumptions at the moment is, or the different paths which that could be. It could be that the debt transfers straight away, or it could be progressive. And the two different paths in terms of how that debt would be settled by the new entity. there's quite a lot of debt amongst all the 5 councils, which would transfer across to the new entity, and to try and do all that in one at one point of time, it may not be possible because of the market conditions and things like that. So, but the teams are working through that to work that through. But we need to understand in terms of the different pathways, in terms of the positioning we need to take with hedging and things like that. And at the moment, we're going minimum so that we're not exposing council to risk, but we still need to manage it through.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Duncan.
This might be a little out of left field, but I just can't help thinking that with the debt transferring to the new entity, we as a council are still responsible, though, if anything goes wrong, aren't we? Under the local government funding agency.
Through you, Chairs. Just to pick up on this, it is an active area where a lot of thought's going into. So the joint CFO forum, if you like, across the councils in the Wellington region. It is a very active thing that we're discussing. In fact, I think there is a meeting this afternoon on this very issue. It's not clear cut. And I think the thinking is still developing, and we're taking expert advice from, Treasury experts. I mean, we can have Treasury experts, but there's another layer of Treasury experts, if you like, that we really are trying to tap into, because all councils are, it's one of the 2 big things, facing this amalgamation and consolidation of many kind of things coming into one. There's the billing and there's the debt. And those 2 things, they're front and centre in all CFOs' minds. We haven't got the answers yet, but we're working hard to make sure that we find an answer that works for all.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Duncan, not a left field question. It sounded to me like it was an on the money question. So, yeah. Thank you. Any further? Councillor Philo.
Yeah, just a question there around the. I see that we're holding 29 million in cash reserves, and then we're looking at paying around that 50K a year to keep that $25 million standby facility open. What's the strategic thinking behind doing both? How are we weighing up the cost of holding the cash versus using it to reduce debt or relying more on the facility if needed?
They've always managed through the Treasury process, but we also have a liquidity ratio which we have to manage as well. So that's been liquid. So that's and we try and minimise the cost to council as much as possible, but we also have to have ability in case something untoward happens. So it's those, which is why we have the standby lines. So they're there, so that they don't cost us anything unless we had to draw down on them. But they're there for emergencies and things like that. So that's part of our Treasury policy.
So through the Chair, just to add to that, it's actually a cost-effective means by which for us to keep our liquidity at the right levels and be within our prudential limits. So that's why we're doing it that way. And we can switch them off at any moment, which is actually another nice advantage, especially going into transition to the new entity.
So it's for making sure the ratios in terms of our borrowing?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Councillor Philo, another situation that might be helpful is that the rating agencies require deposits to be held, and that's why that liquid deposits is high, to be held in advance of repaying debt. So that money is set aside already, if you like, for debt that's going to be paid in the future. All right, no further discussion. Thank you again, Graham, for this exercise and this reporting. So it's been moved and seconded that we receive this report. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Right, agenda item 7.6, legislative compliance. Phyllis, welcome back to the table. I will move that we will get this report on the table for discussion, that we receive this report, seconded by Councillor Duncan. This is a standard 6-monthly exercise that we do. Worthwhile. It always highlights some areas that require a bit of explanation and change. So, thank you, Phyllis. Step us through this briefly, please.
Cool. I'll take this report as read, but just to highlight some points. The intention of this report is to provide this committee with oversight of the systems we have for monitoring legislative compliance. So this report summarizes the key issues. It does note some recurring issues and identifies the governance and management oversight committee that monitors all these non-compliances. So this report is high level across all the various legislative obligations that we do have across this council. As mentioned, I'll take this report as read, and through the chair, would be happy to take any feedback or suggestions on this report.
Thank you, Phyllis. Councillor Legg.
Thanks for the report, Phyllis. I just have under 5, the new non-compliances. 2 we've dealt to. 1, balanced budget, we understand, we just had a discussion about that. So Resource Management Act, not monitoring the efficiency and effectiveness of policy or plan changes, mate. What's happening in that area, and how will we do that?
I can respond to that through the chair. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Liggett, for the question. As you know, we've been putting a lot of investment into getting the proposed district plan over the line and fully operative. We have scoped a monitoring process to bring to council in the next triennium, which hopefully factors in the closing out of one plan and the opening of another plan. Yep.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Felicity.
Phyllis, I wondered if you could comment on the submission that we heard at the start of this meeting from Mr. Warburton. I assume you're familiar with it. It feels like it goes to the topic of this. So just interested in your views on his suggestions that there's non-compliance that's not being picked up in the reporting in relation to the discharge at Te Tahi Bay.
Jim, I'll start and Phyllis can finish if she can add anything, would like to add anything. Look, on page 121, you'll see that we actually reference we actually have a link to the annual compliance report. Unfortunately, that link doesn't work on the public pages. That link goes to the Greater Wellington issued non-compliances, a 17-page report, which provides in detail all the non-compliances. I think that's probably something that we should address. But this committee is not intended to review all those. That's what the Joint Venture Water Committee is required to do. So I have a copy right here of that report, and it is very thorough. So I think we just need to get that link sorted out.
So just so I understand, so the allegations that are in Mr. Warburton's submission, you're aware of and are attending to. It's not you.
Look, he's got a point in respect to the fact that that this report is it's pointing to a more formal report which does a very effective job of reporting those non-compliances. I think what we failed to do is make that link available and work to the public.
Okay, so the ones that he's referring to are picked up in that detailed report?
More than the ones he's referring to.
That's
a lot
the answer.
more. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Felicity. Councillor Philo.
Yeah, just further to that discussion, he was actually talking about all of the pump stations. So does that link, are you talking about this one, annual compliance report? Is that the link you?
Yeah, so it does refer to all the other, any unconsented discharges. It also includes odour complaints. Basically all of the related non-compliances are reported in that report.
So all the pumps across the city
Yep,
that
talks
discharge?
about all.
Okay.
Yep.
I think he did raise a good point, though, that if we're going to talk about the RMA and consents within this legislative report, and we mention the treatment plant, we mention the landfill and odours, we probably should mention the pump stations as well. They're separate to the treatment plant, and they aren't actually covered in the joint meeting. Only a few, I think 3 are covered in the joint meeting, but there's obviously from that list many pump stations. So I take his point that we do, we should be across that, and yeah.
But perhaps that's something that can be taken offline and looked at in relation to the next time the legislative compliance exercise is undertaken. Is that an appropriate response, Jim?
Mike?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This is really complicated around one of the reasons that we don't have non-compliances for our pump stations is because there isn't actually a legal framework around them yet, because we haven't applied for consent yet, because of Plan Change 1 and the government changing regulations in this area. So we're very much aware of what Mr. Warburton was saying this morning. It's a wee bit dangerous to look at it through just a regulatory lens, because, as everybody knows, this is generations worth of investment that has caused the issue that we have now, that we have sewage flowing into our harbour and Titahi Bay, right? So this is also very much in the flight path of the Three Waters reform. And it'll be useful, I think, to link the issue that Mr. Warburton raised this morning to all the other stuff that's going on. So it's not just regulatory stuff, a whole bunch of investment and government reform that is also directly relevant. But it might be best if we did deal with that offline, Mr. Chair, because it is highly complicated and technical in places.
I understand that, Mike. I thank you for those comments, and so we wish you well in dealing with that. I'm sure it's very complicated. Councillor Filo.
Sorry, I think his main point too was just around the transparency. If we're going to say RMA is not consented, and what you just said, that it doesn't even have a consent, I think it should be noted in here for transparency, that's all.
Thank you. Mayor?
I tend to not agree, because we can't list all the pump stations, and I think this goes through the committee that you sit on, Councillor Filo. So it needs to go through that committee. This is the whole. If we start dividing up individual ones across the city, we know what's non-compliant and what's not. And the government ministers last night and Minister Bishop changed the RMA rules yesterday. So some of these things could actually change completely within the next year. So I'll leave it there and talk to the chair of the committee.
Sorry. On my committee, I think you're talking about the wastewater joint committee. That doesn't have all of the treatment. That doesn't have all the pump stations across the city. It only has 4. So just to correct that.
No, you can discuss all of them. It doesn't just have 4, but you can discuss your whole network.
No, we actually can't. We've tried to do that in that committee, and we're told that it's not within the guidelines. But anyways.
Take it offline and work out a sort of coordinated approach to this. All right, any further discussion on the legislative compliance exercise? Very valuable work. Thank you, Phyllis. And it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Agenda item 7.7. Phyllis, I think you're still in the chair for this. This is a standing agenda item. I will move that we get the report on the table, receive the report. Do we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mayor. This is a standing agenda item, looks at the strategic risks, is continually being updated. So again, Phyllis, please just draw our attention to any changes to when we last saw this in March.
I'll take the report as read, and The last time this committee looked at this report was in December, but ELT does look at it more frequently than that. So they did look at it in May. And when they look at it, they consider the impact of anything that might impact the strategic objectives that we have, strategic priorities that we have, rather. They look at the risk outlook for the coming period as well as the adequacy of planned treatments. The discussion also go around about whether there's any action required in terms of the strategic risk that's listed within this document. And at the last discussion, we've agreed that the overall risk rating is still the same. They're all still fairly high at the moment. And the outlook is for this coming period anyway still remains the same. So that's in a nutshell where we're at in terms of strategic risk.
Thank you, Phyllis. Discussion, Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, look, it's great, and I agree with most of the things that you've covered in there. However, there's been a lot of talk in the media lately about Transpower's problems with electricity. And I don't see anything in the strategic lists here for domestic area covering that. And they're quite adamant that power cuts are quite likely, very likely, next year. And I wonder if we shouldn't be covering that in the risks there.
I'll talk to that through the chair. Councillor Duncan does make a very good point.
Yeah.
In fact, we did actually raise this in the last year when we were looking at risks. Somehow it fell off the radar, but you're quite right. We've got an interesting and rather unique set of circumstances occurring at the moment where we are finding that we're going into winters with much lower, in fact, I think almost historically low levels of reserved water in our lakes. And, you know, you get your peak flows actually occurring generally around this spring and also the summer snow melt periods. And some of that we're just not getting as much of. So what you're seeing spikes in electricity prices even before winter. In fact, those spikes can be higher than in winter. On top of that, we're seeing our reserves being reclassified around the gas. So our gas reserves are less than what were anticipated. And you're starting to see potentially coal being brought back through Huntley, the third boiler potentially being introduced. So I think it is a serious matter. And Transpower have identified that while they can get access to contingent reserves in terms of drawing down more water, there is both. There's two effects of that. There's the environmental effects, and secondly, if you draw down more water during winter, then you've got to top it up again, which is problematic. So from a risk point of view, we need to look at this, I think, as a business continuity risk, and we do have some thoughts and have had some thinking about what we would do to make sure that we've got, in those circumstances, what can we do around continuous supply of electricity, say, to this building, for example.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for the question, again, on the money. Felicity.
Thanks, Phyllis. Great report. I really like your commentary and setting the scene. I've just got one question, which is relates to page 140 about the likelihood of a cyber attack. So is that possible? And I just wondered whether that had been reviewed in light of AI and the increase of attacks. I thought possible, might be too light, but just interested in your thinking on that.
Yep. So
Again, that could probably be taken offline and looked at and reflected on. So, unless you can respond to it now, or happy to respond to it now, Phyllis.
I'll try. And so possible rating is, it could happen within the next 1 to 3 years. So it's not, so it's very real in terms of the risk. So that's why we had the rating as possible. In terms of cybersecurity, management is doing quite a lot of work in that space, the security training being one of them. And one of the key factors in terms of like how people gain access to the system is through people. And so there's a lot of training around making sure that, you know, people are not the weakness in terms of getting into our systems. So yeah, we will constantly consider it, but happy to take that into advisement. But yeah, definitely cybersecurity and information security is on our radar in terms of a risk that needs to be managed.
Through the chair, I think we've got to distinguish between a possible effective cyber attack and the likelihood of a cyber attack. We get them all the time. So what we're talking about here is one that actually penetrates our defences. And so with the work that we've done around cybersecurity, not to be underestimated by any means. Cybersecurity used to be for most major businesses in New Zealand the number one thing that board members used to be, lose sleep over. And they're still losing sleep over it, and they should do. So I think it's probably categorised correctly, but there is more attacks occurring.
Yeah, so it's a successful cyber attack.
Yep.
Because it's described as an attempt, and that is exactly as you said, happening all the time.
Yes.
But it's one that actually does damage and gets
Correct.
through. Yeah, that makes.
Right, thank you for that question. No further discussion. It's been moved and seconded. So all those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you, Phyllis, for that work. You're still in the chair. Agenda item 7.8, the risk and insurance update. I'll move that the Audit and Risk Committee receive the update report and approve the risk and assurance plan for 25-26. So do I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Leggett. So again, just introduce us to this report, Phyllis. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So this year's plan is near completion and the final audit report is underway and will be presented to this committee in the next meeting. Management is also making satisfactory progress on the audit recommendations, and that's all listed in the report, which I'll take as read. In terms of the plan for next year, I'll focus on the internal audit reviews. I'm recommending 3 audits again. This has been reviewed by our executive team and is bringing to this committee for approval. We propose looking at the rates process, and that would be looking at the process and controls around processing rates. So that would include like the quarterly rates invoicing, rates debt control, rates remission, postponement and rebates, the process around that, application of any penalties as well as any write-offs, and as well as calculating and billing GW rates. So that's parcel of the process that will be covered under this audit. Second audit we are proposing is around the membership and booking system. So the council is proposing to replace a legacy system with an off-the-shelf application, but this would mean changes to our business processes. And the business processes that could be impacted will include like customer records, bookings for facilities, rental contracts for facilities that we use at our council, as well as payment, receipting, and bank reconciliation. So there's a probability that these processes will change as a result of this new system. So this audit proposes looking at the design of those processes and controls just to make sure that they are adequate as part of that implementation. And we have, again, sensitive expenditure review, which will get Deloitte back into both review management actions and follow up on the things that they've just talked about earlier today. And that for your summary.
Thank you, Phyllis. I was asking Phyllis about the reasons behind the membership and booking. I didn't on the face of it, didn't see it as a sort of major part of the council's activities. But I think because there is a new process, because it's very sort of public facing, so therefore is a risk for reputation. I certainly support that this is a really worthwhile piece of work to put into the internal audit plan. So, any questions or discussions on that, on the update for this year or the plan for next year? Councillor Thilo?
Thanks for the report, Phyllis, and for the update on this year's assurance plan. So I can see, and you've already just stated the three audits that we're going to do in the next year, and I understand why they've been selected. But I wanted to raise something broader that I believe reflects what a lot of our community is feeling right now. And it's come through strongly in the annual plan submissions, the hearings and the ongoing conversation with the residents. People are being asked to pay more. This is across the country. They're struggling to see where their money's going, and there's a sense that councils need to take a harder look at their own spending, not just isolated areas, but across the board. So I'd like to ask, can this committee look at building a full line-by-line review of council spending into future assurance work? So I'm not talking about just another audit of one department, but I mean a clear, transparent look at all operational spending to identify savings, reduce waste, and help rebuild the public trust. And it's not about crossing into operations or micromanaging, but it's about doing our job as governors, that we're serious about affordability and financial responsibility, and just visibility over how every dollar's been spent.
Chief Executive.
If I'm understanding you correctly, Councillor, I don't think this is an audit issue so much as an issue for the full council to consider. It would be very expensive the way you have described that. And we have actually gone through a line-by-line assessment, but you seem to be asking for a greater level of scrutiny than we have done this year. So I'm a bit unclear as to the exact parameters, but it is a matter for the full council. It doesn't sound to me like an audit issue as such.
Thank you, Chief Executive. So that discussion can continue elsewhere. So yeah.
And in fact, we will be having to do a complete restructure of our finances anyway, and examine our costs as we move into an amended LTP post-water. So you'll probably get some of what you want, I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, through the next process. So, there's a lot of moving parts right now. So, but it is a matter for the full council to discuss.
All right. Thank you for that. It's been moved and seconded that we receive the update report, and we agree looking at that we approve the risk and assurance plan for 25-26. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. I'll now move a motion to go into public excluded, and that Sam Nicole and Kieron Wright from Ernst & Young be permitted to remain in the meeting. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Waddle. Jack, we're in public... Oh, sorry, we need to vote. Well done, Jack, thank you. So all those in favour, it's moved and seconded that we go into public excluded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried.